Hi everyone, and welcome to this special space weather report. I'm your host Stefan Burns. We've just had a solar wind shockwave impact the planet, and this has triggered geomagnetic volatility all across the globe. Right now there's aurora that's sweeping through the polar regions. Siberia and Northern Europe just got a really nice show of aurora. Now it's North America's turn. This solar wind stream is still strong, and interestingly, right as that geomagnetic storm started to build, there was a minor earthquake swarm off the southern coast of Japan. And so there was a magnitude 5.9 earthquake, also a magnitude 5.7, and then some lesser magnitude earthquakes, all rupturing in quick succession in a small area. And Japan is very careful with earthquakes because they have a long history of there being foreshocks before big earthquakes. So a magnitude 5.9 isn't that large, especially because it's more off to the south and in the ocean, but perhaps it's a foreshock before something larger. That has a lot of history to it. It's not guaranteed every time. It's about a 5% probability, but that's definitely something to watch. So we are going to examine what's happening with the Earth geophysically right now because of this solar wind shockwave and this enhanced solar wind strength, this geomagnetic storm, and then we'll look at the earthquake swarm off the southern coast of Japan, and then we'll wrap up with a quick question and answer, and also we'll do a sound healing. I have my two different bowls here, and we'll just play the bowls a little bit to help balance and harmonize our own energies, because our own energies, biologically and more, can get kind of thrown off whack sometimes when you have these sudden sharp changes in energy, whether it's from a geomagnetic storm, whether it's from, let's say, like a thunderstorm in your area. There's a whole bunch of things. So this is one way, a sound healing meditation is one way to just help rest, relax, enhance the parasympathetic nervous system. Happy to do that all for you. And so that is our agenda today. Let's go right into these magnetic field swings that are happening across the globe. We have our geospace delta B map right here. And so we see that this is pretty strong. We see our scale. This is the total swing in the magnetic field strength, and it goes up to 400 nanotesla, then actually goes off scale if it gets really dark red. And we see that not only we're having a strong concentration here in the polar regions, this is South Pole, this is North Pole, here's our time. This is for about the past 3 hours, I believe, maybe 3-4 hours. You also, though, will see enhanced geomagnetic volatility across the mid-latitude and equatorial regions. So this is still going up to about 100, 120, even maybe like 200 nanotesla. Like, see this blob pop up there? Field swings across the entire globe, which is pretty notable. This is only a G1 storm at this moment in time. So the scale rating goes to 5. You have G1, G2, G3, G4, G5, and then there's something called a KP index, which is like what's used to categorize that. That goes from 1 to 9. And so when you have a KP index of 5, you have a G1 storm. You need a KP index of 9, the highest value, to have a G5 storm. This is only a G1 storm, but we do see some pretty intense magnetic fluctuations across the globe. Again, not only in the polar regions, but also here across the mid-latitude and equatorial regions. It had a pretty significant pulse earlier that gave there was a burst of aurora across northern Europe. And that may continue through tonight, meaning that people in North America may get a show. Those in Canada, Alaska, perhaps even in those states that border along Canada, they may get aurora tonight. If you're in one of those places now and it's dark, you may want to go out and look for it. But that may continue on. So let us check out some of this other data. Let's check out our aurora forecast right now. Here's North America. And you'll see this pulse that swept across Siberia. This is like a 1 hour, 1 day view here. So I can drag this over for you all. And so you'll see here, it's going, and you'll see when this solar wind shockwave hits, because it's very clear. You see the aurora start to widen, and boom, there you go. So all across Northern Europe there, and then starting to go into like Greenland and Canada, but has subsided before now kind of re-strengthening, as you see right there. So there is this second burst of activity that's occurring at this moment in time for the Northern Hemisphere. If we click out of this and go to the Southern Hemisphere, Let's see what's happening there. It's unlikely that we're going to have aurora visible across any of the places that have actually people living there. For example, the southern tip of South America, New Zealand, Australia. But it's possible, but we would need this to strengthen a bit more than just a G1 storm. So if you're in the base in Antarctica, then you may be seeing this. I don't think anyone's watching from there, but who knows? We do see that we had this increase in the aurora there, but again, population effectively zero. So the people who are seeing aurora right now are in the Northern Hemisphere, Northern Europe, Siberia, and now Canada, Alaska, and perhaps even in that upper part of the continental 48. And if you are in those areas, at the very least, if you go out and look to the north, you may see some red glow. Or for example, if you take out your phone and do long exposure, 3 minutes or something like that, you'll probably catch some red glow at this moment in time if you're in North America. Let us look at the actual solar wind dynamics right now. You'll notice right here, we're back to a G1 storm according to the NOAA space weather portal there. So yeah, this has been strengthening and re-strengthening, you could say. Actually, before we go to the solar wind data, let us look at our HB30 and HB60 indices, because this gives us a nuanced look at this geomagnetic storm. We can look at our 10-day data, and let us actually zoom in here, going from, let's say, like March 7th. Yeah, just for the past 2 days, which will be right here. Just got to click it over. There we go. So here we have our past 48 plus hours of data, just a little bit more than 48 hours. We see that our conditions here were low and quiet. We did have a little bit of a pulse there going up to 4. You see that. This is a 1 hour measure, but then subsided back down. But look at how we've been ramping up, and some of these values even got close to 6. This 1 hour measure there, 5.667. 5.33, that gave us those KP values of 4.67, which is that 3 hour measure. We can see that right here. Now we've had 9 hours of this G1 storm. We're right below that KP index of 5, which is the official designation for a G1, but they also click it in when you get a 4.667, they round up. So 9 hours now of geomagnetic storming. And that's the first time we've had some significant storming like this for about a week or so, especially of this magnitude. And it's actually been a while since we've had a good geomagnetic storm. So this is kind of overdue, you could say. If we go to our real-time solar wind, we can better see this. We can see the specifics of this. So here we have our past 3 days of solar wind data. And if I step over here, again, you can see the KP index is lower, that 3 hour measure of geomagnetic volatility. Then we have some other measures here. We have our plasma temperature, we have our plasma velocity, and our plasma density. And I say plasma for solar wind because we have a probe effectively just hanging out at the L1 Lagrange point in space, and it's just measuring the characteristics of its surrounding environment, which is always having solar wind sweep by it, right? Our little part of space that we are in is always being enhanced by the sun because it's within the heliosphere. But basically, it's just measuring outside that vacuum that exists. There is some plasma and dust. And so it's measuring those plasma characteristics. So we see that the solar wind velocity just a couple days ago was like 400 kilometers per second. Density was like 7 to 8 particles per cubic centimeter. Temperature was fairly normal. Now look at how everything is bumped up. So most notably velocity, now over 500, getting close to 600 at some times, just recently. Plasma density also bumped up. Now it's hovering around 20 or so. And the temperature also bumped up too. We see our interplanetary magnetic field up there. This is measuring the magnetic field characteristics of that little part in space that this satellite is in. This is the L1 Lagrange point. So this gives us a 1 hour heads up as to what is about to hit us, because it's 1% of the distance to the sun. So we see our solar wind was basically normal. Values here are 5, 6, 7, something like that, right? Some of them are actually a little enhanced, but average is 5. So until you get up to 10, you're kind of within normal territory. This is the black line for the total field strength. The red line is this southward component. It's a certain vector direction in the magnetic field, and you need that to go negative for there to really have a good connection between the solar wind and Earth's magnetic field. And that's what we see here all of a sudden starting just today. So if we go to our 1-day view, we'll really get to zoom in on these changes. And we see, I'll put my head right there because that's the one part where things cooled off for a bit. But here we see that we started to get these negative southward components as the total field strength increased, that black line. We had a little bit of a breather there, and then everything really got started. Then it really flipped southward. Solar wind strength went all the way up to nearly 20. I think it maybe even hit 20 nanotesla, 18 right there at the top. So that's pretty strong. And then we see the sustained southward component right there. We see now we've been in this kind of more unsettled period where it's been going up and down and oscillating. This is when we had aurora really nicely over northern Europe. So right now, just like right now, we're starting to have things click back up into the positive zone. But if this continues to then go back down into that negative zone, just like here, then we could have some really good aurora tonight. And so we often see with the solar wind, these zones where we have like good conditions for aurora and geomagnetic volatility, and then like a disturbed period where the solar wind's kind of flipping back and forth and it's locking in and disconnecting to Earth's magnetic field on and off. And then it'll go back to that. It'll go back to this. And so that's possible. Though this could be petering out. We just don't know. This is a little bit of a stealthy solar wind storm, you could say, because we knew there was a high-speed stream coming in, but you see some of these enhancements there, like these jumps right there are a little atypical for just a high-speed stream. So there's some other things that were kind of embedded within this high-speed stream that's been impacting us, and therefore, you know, this could last a little bit longer than we may think. Plasma density is high and velocity is, you know, it's actually not even that high if you look at it from a high-speed stream perspective, these coronal holes. Let's check that out. Let me show you what it is that's been giving us primarily this enhanced solar wind over the past 24 hours. Here we have our sun at a 193 and a 304 angstrom view. And we see a few different things here over the past 48 hours. First up, we see these coronal holes. There's one, there's one, there's a little bit of a line right there, but this is the main one for sure. That one has already swept by us. This high-speed stream is already basically sweeping by the Earth right now because of its location on the sun. This one has yet to hit us. This is smaller, but it hasn't moved through that geo-effective position yet, which is right about here. So that is also emitting a high-speed stream of particles because this is an area where the magnetic field is open, the plasma temperature is lower, so it shows up dark, and these ions flow out of the sun really quickly. They can get really fast. They can go beyond 500 kilometers per second. They go to 700, 800 kilometers per second, sometimes even greater, but that's more rare. That's what we saw just recently, actually, about maybe like a week and a half ago. We had solar wind go up to like 700, 800 kilometers per second. Right now, it's still in the 500 to 600 range from this guy. You'll also see a few other things that occurred on the sun over the past 2 days using this combined view. Check out that coronal loop which blasted off. That was intense. Now, that did not impact the Earth. That went way off to the south-southwest. We saw one right before it, a lesser plasma filament destabilized, and then we got that coronal loop. And we'll notice right at the beginning of the video, we'll see a burst right here. That was a plasma filament which launched to the south, but from Earth direct right there. See that pretty quick. So there has been some other activity, and that's maybe contributing a little bit to this stealthy solar storm signature that we're seeing, because it doesn't seem like these conditions are just from the high-speed stream. As I pointed out, we were getting those we had those 3 or more rapid jumps in the interplanetary magnetic field strength, which is typically from a coronal mass ejection, some sort of higher density packet kind of just sweeping by and causing a jolt. High-speed stream will usually be more of a gradual ramp and then decline in the magnetic field strength. So some high-speed streams coming from the sun. First one's ready to hit us. Second one will come in about probably 3 days or so. And there's some other things kind of embedded within them that's giving Earth a shock right now at this moment in time. We also have our 131 angstrom view of the sun, so we can see the sort of solar flares that we've been having for the past 48 hours. And so we won't really see much. Sun's been fairly quiet, a little bit of activity there. But in general, things have been fairly good. This sunspot group has been kind of crackling with energy. But again, we haven't had any real significant flares now for a while. I mean, we've only had some low M-class flares. We did have one yesterday. We'll see that at the end of the 7th here. So it should pop off right from this region. It's probably the one that I already pointed at. That's it right there. That was a 1.5 or something. I mean, I could zoom in over here, look at the data. It's a 1.6 M-class flare. If we go to our 7-day, we've only had 2 M-class flares in 7 days, both of them being below 2. So it was like a 1.7 and a 1.6. They both were very similar and very short in their duration. So solar flare activity has been fairly low. Let's check out sunspots. Sunspots also actually have just dropped below 100 for the first time in a while. Not a while, but they just dropped below 100. Let's check it out. Here we have our sunspots, and I'll step over here. This is for basically the past 30 days. We see that we've been oscillating in between 100 and 200. And we kind of broke back over 150 for March, the beginning of March, but now we've been on this decline there. We're definitely under 100. Actually, we're closer to about 80. If you look at these marks right there, that is smack dab at 80. So sunspots are down. We've gone below this low value there where it just briefly dropped below 100. I think that's probably the 11th that it lines up with of February. So sunspots are down, but we've had this increased geomagnetic volatility because of these high-speed streams. And also right now, it's the time of the year where we have greater connectivity between the solar wind and Earth's magnetic field. This has a variety of explanations for it. First off, you have greater, you have the positioning of Earth's magnetic field to the solar wind is enhanced. This is an equinoctial effect. And then you have the Russell-McFerrin effect, which is talking about specifically solar wind dynamics. And then you also have the potential for stronger geomagnetic activity from solar wind conditions that are just enhanced because of this, because of equinox and how the ionosphere is now rapidly changing as the Earth is moving more from southern hemisphere dominant to northern hemisphere dominant. This is the March equinox. That's the dynamic at play for the March equinox. So we have a lot of things right now contributing to this potential for greater geomagnetic volatility. Now let us go though into our earthquake swarm for Japan, because this is pretty interesting. I think the timing on this is really, really interesting. Here we have our map from Volcano Discovery, and you can see all the earthquakes that have occurred in this swarm if you use the map from Volcano Discovery. If you go to USGS latest earthquakes, you're not going to see them because they only track the biggest earthquakes. They don't include all the different observatory stations or observatory networks, whereas Volcano Discovery compiles them all together. So here we have this earthquake swarm. You see it's not, 300 earthquakes or anything, but we see, let's count them. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 earthquakes, that's pretty good. And we see this 5.7 there. That is 9 hours ago. And then we have here our 5.9, which is just less than 3 hours ago. That was 1 hour and 31 minutes ago. So that was very recent. And then we see a whole bunch of others like a magnitude 3.5. I think this one there is a magnitude 4.7. Yeah, 4.7. So we see some lower magnitude ones kind of clustered around it. But you'll notice that we had this 5.7. That was the first one basically, and then we had a stronger one following, a 5.9, but they're both pretty close in magnitude. So that's interesting because typically if you have a foreshock preceding a larger earthquake, the larger one's usually bigger by a lot, like an order of magnitude. So the fact that these are very close together in their magnitude almost indicates that either A, this is just what it's going to be, and it's just a small little release of energy, or that these are both precursors to something bigger. And the probability of that's like maybe 5 to 10%, maximum 10%, because based on historic data, like the statistics, if you get an earthquake, kind of like this, right? You also have some distributed action. There's about a 5% chance that's a foreshock, especially for a region like Japan that's very seismically active, one of the most seismically active places in the world. We'll notice the location there off the southern coast. So if there is a big one, then it will be basically isolated. You know, we don't want one over Tokyo. They've had those in the past. But if it could perhaps trigger a tsunami. If you have a lot of movement of the seafloor, you have, let's say, like a magnitude 8 or something. This is just, you know, kind of some information for you. That is what could trigger a tsunami, and then you'd have tsunami warnings sent out for this entire region. We also do see here another magnitude 5 right there, 19 hours ago, 5.2. So the strongest earthquakes that we've been having recently have been only magnitude 5.5 to magnitude 6 or so. Actually, earthquake activity has been fairly low, which is why this one's kind of notable. You have to put it in context as to what is happening right now, because the strongest earthquakes haven't really been breaking above a 5.5, and now we have a 5.7 and a 5.9 rapid fire in the same location today as this geomagnetic storm is going. Again, this first one was about 8 hours ago, right? So we can go back to our real-time solar wind. Let's go back 8 hours to see where it was. Turn that off, and we just have to find it. Here we go. Real-time solar wind. And this data platform, by the way, you should check this out yourself if you don't do it already. That's why I spend time explaining what it is, how to read it. So you can always do this yourself when I'm not going live or making a video. But right now it's 3:21 a.m. UTC time. So let's just call it 3. So that means we want to go back 8, right? So we want to go back to 1700. And look at that. And remember, there's a 1-hour delay on this. So this nice enhancement of the solar wind started right there at 1620. And so that would then hit Earth at 1720. That's effectively when that earthquake occurred. Let's go back one more time and get the exact timestamp for that earthquake. We just did the approximate calculation, but let's get the exact timestamp. It was at 1854 GMT, which is also UTC. It should be also UTC. So 1854, we go back to our real-time solar wind, and that would then correspond to effectively 1754, which is right about there. So right when this enhancement of the solar wind shockwave hit the Earth, basically right afterwards, that 5.7 earthquake ruptured in Japan. And then as this continued on, that 5.9 then ruptured. Find that very interesting. So that is the update right now. Yeah, that's basically what's happening. I hope you're all feeling well. This isn't the biggest enhancement of geomagnetic activity that there can be, right? This could evolve a lot more, just like, I'm not saying it will, but a G1 storm is only 1 out of 5. So we've had G3 storms, we've had G4 storms, we've had G5 storms in the past, back just, in the past few months, really. So this, we're getting kind of used to these quieter conditions, though that doesn't mean that these magnetic field swings aren't small. Sometimes, as you see, they're quite large. Even for a G1 storm, especially if you're living in these areas. If you're living there, you're experiencing a lot more activity than you are if you're living, let's say, in Mexico or something like that. But as we're seeing, these magnetic field swings are still enhanced for these parts of the globe. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, I'll take some questions that are relevant to this video. I'm not going to answer any questions that are off topic from this video tonight. So make sure you're aware of that. So just type @Stefan Burns and I'll do my best to answer a few questions, and then we'll play the singing bowls and do a little bit of sound healing to help balance and equalize these energies and to help bring in some of these energies that are coming in, energy and information, right? The sun is releasing this energy and information outwards at all times. And sometimes it hits Earth and triggers these geomagnetic storms, and the Earth takes that solar energy, reformats it into a way that we can work with more easily. We're super connected biologically to the magnetic field. Once you look at the atomic level, the molecular level, and the cellular level. So we're receiving this energy and information from the sun via the earth. And how is that, like, what's that awakening within us? What sort of downloads are we getting, right? When you do a sound healing, that can enhance that. So again, at Stefan Burns to ask any questions. First question on topic is from Katya, which is, how does the plasma affect us? So we have the sun sending out this plasma at all times, and it will go ahead and, let's actually change the graphic here so you can kind of see this a little better. So we have the sun sending out this plasma, it makes up the solar wind, and then it flows down the magnetic field into the earth. First it meets at the edge of the magnetic field, creates this like magnetopause. We actually see that right here. If I put this video on really quick. This is the magnetopause. This solar wind's coming in, it hits the magnetopause, and then it flows down the polar cusp and creates the aurora. So how does the plasma affect us? Well, it's not really working with us directly. We do have plasma within our bodies. Sometimes the earth releases plasma, so there are times where plasma is working with us kind of more directly. But the main way this solar plasma is working with us is that it enters into Earth's geophysical systems, mainly like the ionosphere, the radiation belts, and even sometimes the upper atmosphere. And then that triggers magnetic field changes, which then propagate out across the globe. And it's those magnetic field swings that you're more receptive to biologically. And your heart, for example, really connects to the magnetic field of the Earth. And so that's really how the plasma is working with you could say. There's a lot more research that needs to be done there, but that's an interesting thing to explore. And Tommy T is asking, how does this energy align with the Calm Before the Storm podcast earlier in the week? That was the video I released just yesterday, the Calm Before the Storm. Well, you know, I guess I was spot on with that because this is a geomagnetic storm, and yesterday everything was completely calm and quiet, and there wasn't a forecast out, by the way, for this. I mean, we knew the high-speed stream was coming in, but this has been a little bit stronger than was expected. So, and then also the earthquake swarm in Japan. Again, it's not like a magnitude 7 or anything, but it started up right when this geomagnetic storm kicked into gear. So very, very interesting, right when that solar wind shockwave. So it looks like this could be a little bit of a preview perhaps of what's to come. Maybe it's just the appetizer before first course, second course, main course, who knows? Maybe this is it. Everything could be quiet for a while, but just based off of what we're seeing with March, talked about that in depth in some of my videos, I think we got a lot more to come. We just don't know how it's going to express itself. We know there's going to be expressions of that across society. And let's say like world leaders and arguments and things of this nature, all that nonsense. I think we're going to see some expressions of it financially too. We're already seeing increased volatility in the traditional markets. I mean, for example, S&P 500 has really gone down. It's near its like 200-day moving average and needs to hold that. There's been huge swings in the Forex markets, right? I mean, the US dollar has dropped like a rock against the euro, the pound, basically every currency. And there's been tons of volatility in crypto, and it looks like it's about to go off another cliff. So I think there's going to be continued financial volatility through March. And then I think we're also going to see some solar storms and geomagnetic storms as well, perhaps some notable earthquakes. I think there's going to be an Earth-related expression to this as well, as all these energies kind of sweep over us, starting with that lunar eclipse. I mean, it's already starting now, but that's kind of the deal. Yeye is asking, do we worry about a tsunami in Hawaii? No, there'd be no tsunami warning that you need to be concerned about from a magnitude 5.9 earthquake. So you're fine. Hawaii is very far away. You're good to go. Another question is Lucy Roseup is asking, how regular is all these levels of geomagneticity? Or I guess just, maybe that is kind of the word. Geomagnetic volatility, you could say. Just seems strange to me, but I'm new to these charts. Seven's the weather, usually this in flux. So we have right now more of these sort of geomagnetic storms because it is solar maximum. That really kicked off in 2024. Then we had some solar storms back in 2023 that were strong, but it really kicked off in 2024 really the high mark so far with geomagnetic activity was back in May. May 10th to the 12th, the Mother's Day storm, G5 storm. That was a big one. We also had another big storm in October, which was close to it in scale, but not as significant. We've had a lot of other storms in between. But during solar maximum, you get a lot more geomagnetic storms because you have more activity from the sun being flung out through the solar system, and some of that inevitably hits Earth. We're going to have solar maximum through 2025 into 2026, and then we start going down in 2026, 2027 in the descending phase. And that is also a very active time because during that descending phase, you still have a lot of solar activity flinging out. It's only until you get to solar minimum that things really cool off, and then the ascending phase is typically fairly quiet as well. It's more maximum and descending phase that are the most active, especially geomagnetically on Earth. 44% of all geomagnetic storms occur during the descending phase based off of the most recent solar cycles, like the past 3 or 4. So that's a good amount. Now, another question from Katya is how does the eclipse and solar storm amplify each other? Well, that's interesting because, for example, we already know that when the moon is in the magnetotail, that can enhance a geomagnetic storm because it's playing with the plasma and the magnetotail. There's like a flux tube of plasma there. There's a whole bunch of things they call it. Flux tube, plasma sheet, whatever. They're all just kind of trying to describe how the plasma exists in the magnetotail. But that's some of the most highly energetic plasma, traveling at the fastest speeds. When the moon swings through that, it can cause some destabilizations and enhance geomagnetic activity, also through some other mechanisms. When the moon's in front of the Earth, that can cause the solar wind to become more noisy and the field swings to get bigger, like 5 nanotesla, even up to 10 nanotesla bigger in the swings. And so with an eclipse, you have the moon exactly aligned with the Sun-Earth plane, that ecliptic plane. And so if you have, for example, the new moon coming up on the 29th of this month is going to be a solar eclipse, partial solar eclipse. It's going to be exactly on that ecliptic plane. If we have a solar storm sweep by right at that time, just let's say by happenstance, then it's going to create more noisy solar wind. Or with the full moon on the 14th, if we have continuing geomagnetic activity on the 14th, then that full moon being right there, also perfectly aligned with the Earth-Sun plane, could perhaps amplify that a little bit as well. So there's not a direct connection, but there is a little bit there that you can work with. Thanks Tommy T for joining the Soul Tribe. And Diva's mom is asking, will this all cause people to be more aggressive? The moon, that is. So many leaders seem over-aggressive recently. Well, I think that's more to do with the double retrogrades that we have right now, especially the Venus retrograde. And we have a bunch of energy moving into Aries if you look at Western Tropical. And so this is just a preview. The next 14 years are going to be like this with Neptune and Aries. People are going to be really kind of like aggressive with that. We're entering into a period of greater conflict based on Western Tropical astrology. But we also know when there's greater geomagnetic volatility, that can also just cause people to be a little bit more volatile. Metabolism's ramped up, energy is just a little bit more volatile. And so, yeah, that doesn't help. And then you have Venus retrograde, Venus being the planet of people, relationships, and harmony and peace. That going backwards through Aries in her fall is not really a good signature. And so, you know, just an interesting data point, that meltdown that occurred in the White House between Trump, Zelensky, and everyone else, right? That whole just whatever nonsense, both sides of it was nonsense. That occurred right as Venus was stationing retrograde. So, you know, there's something to this stuff. So expect that to continue all the way till mid-April. But then it's going to take on more of like a background, like more even, you could say, kind of conflict-driven energy will be in our deep subconscious because of Neptune being there. That's just a possibility. I think that's going to be the case. So yeah, that's it for the questions. Let us move on to our Cosmic Connection meditation, and then I'll wish you all well, and I'm going to have my dinner. Yeah, stage. It very well could be staged. I'm glad you said that, Ventura, because you have to remember that Trump is an actor, right? All those years with The Apprentice and more, and then Zelensky also is an actor, right? He was an actor before he ever got into politics, so it's very possible that that was totally staged. That is 100% possible. I thought that after that happened. And if it was pretty convincing. But we do have to remember that these people are actors before they were politicians. And so, you know, they're good at that stuff. But let us play our crown chakra bowl and also our third eye bowl right here. Yeah, Ronald Reagan too. Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of the increasing trend of politicians being actors first and foremost, because there's a component of, you know, being kind of good on the stage is a necessary skill for a politician. And I mean, we hope that, you don't want to leave that skill behind in terms of just being comfortable in front of people and on camera and stuff, let's say. But you hope that there's not manipulation that's occurring, right? And everything's just a charade or a show. You want people to be honest and trustworthy. And, you know, I wish people would just actually say it as it is, right? Like, I think, for example, the United States would get a lot more respect globally if we admitted our faults. Like, if a world leader, like if the president of the United States, I was thinking about this, you know, here in America, we're completely bipolar. Our two-party system has us totally bipolar. And everyone else from around the world is like, we can't deal with these Americans because for 4 years, they're like, you know, they're acting like this and we expect that. And then all of a sudden, literally a day later with the change in the administration, they're acting completely different. They're completely bipolar, right? And I think people know this, but, you know, it hasn't been really maybe said into words. But if the president of the United States was just like went up there, or someone, a top politician, whatever, said, hey, by the way, you know, we got to recognize that due to our voting system and the polarity in our government and our country, that we're very bipolar. I hope you guys can work with us. We're trying to work this out and be better. I think people would just being honest and trustworthy, truthful would be a good thing for everyone around the world, a good policy for everyone to adopt. And unfortunately, that I think people are afraid to admit the truth if it casts them in a negative light. But how can you heal something or fix something if you're not actually willing to look at it honestly and truthfully? If we can't admit that in America that we're bipolar, then how are we ever going to heal that? Because you don't want to be bipolar. I have childhood experiences with that. They're not good. I do a lot of childhood trauma healing because of that. So get a comfortable position. You can start regulating your breathing. Focus on your third eye and your crown chakra as there's energy coming in from the sun into Earth's magnetic field and our overall energy system. Bring this energy in first through the crown and then allow it to visualize in your third eye. What do you see? What do you feel? What instant knowing or downloads do you get from this energy? What do you know to be true? What is the truth? Externally, internally. Flowing in, crown chakra tingling, pulsing, vibrating. What do you see? We draw in more energy from the sun. Now we move it to the third eye. Breathe. Breathe into your soul. Allow this energy to flow across you like a waterfall. Thank you all for being here, for tuning in, not only to this live stream, but for tuning into yourself. How do you feel? Your connection to Source, the sun, earth, stars, for tuning into something greater. What's truly important. To unfocus our gaze from the distractions and see the grand picture before us. The universe stretches out in front of us, full of amazing opportunities. And we lose sight of that if we focus on just certain things. So open up your gaze, open up your heart, and everything that you're hoping for, wishing for, dreaming for, if it's in alignment with your higher spirit, it will come true. I can speak from personal experience there. I'm just one of many people, of course, that can do that. But I know that when I jumped off the cliff to do this journey with traveling around the world and starting a YouTube channel and a holistic wellness business, it was daunting, but I just kept at it, and everything beautifully unfolded in front of me. I have so many synchronistic moments, I can't even count them. I mean, one was when I moved here to San Diego and I was having a little bit of a hiccup in finding a place to rent, because they need to see, like, you know, your income, your bank statements, whatever, and it just wasn't qualifying for certain things, but I needed the apartment to all of a sudden be able to set up the business. Everything just lined up perfectly. I worked with the alignments and everything, and I released my e-course, my planetary resonances e-course, and all of a sudden the whole world opened up. So things like that can happen. And in fact, if you'd like to learn more about these sort of energies, these planetary energies, like I talked about Neptune, the retrogrades and stuff, that planetary resonances e-course is great for that. 15 hours of video content. Just FYI. That's so foundational. If you watch this channel often, you really should dive into that, because then you'll understand a lot more of what I'm speaking about. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you're all feeling wonderful now, before and after this sound healing meditation. And I'll keep you up to date with what is happening here on Earth, because we may just be at the beginning of a new wave of activity. The calm before the storm may be coming to an end with this geomagnetic storm, this minor but still significant earthquake storm off the south coast of Japan. We'll just have to wait and see. I'll keep you up to date every step of the way. Sending you all lots of love and light, and I'll see you all very, very soon.